This is Slither Sisters, Chapter 11. Robert was determined to get stronger, so he devoted the entire evening to exercise. He practiced all the calisthenics he learned in gym class: sit-ups, jumping jacks, leg lifts, and lunges. And once an hour, he lay down on the floor on his bedroom and forced himself to do push-ups. At 8 o'clock, he did 15 in a row. At 9 o'clock, he did half as many. By 10, he barely squeezed out 3 1/4. Then he stumbled into the bathroom, unbuttoned his shirt, and examined himself in the mirror, studying his physique for signs of change. His biceps looked the same, but the muscles in his chest seemed, well, if not bigger, then definitely swollen. Was this his imagination? That's true, they do swell. Robert turned left and right, studying his body from different angles. It was hard to tell. Mrs. Arthur walked past the door. "What are you doing?" Robert unbuttoned his shirt. "Nothing." She squeezed behind him, studying their reflections in the bathroom mirror. "I hope you're not worried about your looks. You're going to make a very handsome president." Mrs. Arthur had been thrilled to learn that Robert was running for student council. She seemed to believe that he had an excellent chance of winning, that everyone in Lovecraft Middle School loved Robert as much as she did. There were times, Robert thought, when his mother simply didn't have a clue. After tucking Pip and Squeak into their shoebox, Robert got into bed and fell asleep immediately. All the exercise had made him very tired. That night he had another dream, and for once it wasn't a nightmare. He was back at Lovecraft Middle School with Karina Ortiz, and she was telling him to wear the red shirt with the little squares, and then she playfully swatted his shoulder. Only this time her fingers didn't pass through his skin. This time her hand was warm and solid. She was real. Robert looked into her eyes, astonished. "I know," she said, grinning. "Isn't it crazy?" He woke up shivering. His alarm clock read 3:13. He pulled his blankets up to his shoulders and turned over in bed, trying to return to his dream. He willed himself to fall asleep, but he was too cold to concentrate. It was freezing. He sat up in bed. His window was open. That was weird. Robert often propped his window open during the summer, but never after Labor Day. It was now the end of October, when the night temperature could dip as low as 30 degrees. Maybe his mother had opened it. A frigid wind whipped through the room, fluttering the posters taped over the bed, threatened to rip their corners from the walls. He wished there was a way to close the window without leaving the warmth of the blankets. He lay there for a moment, mustering the willpower to stand, and in that moment his toe nudged something smooth and cool and dry, something with the texture of a leather shoe. Robert was always falling asleep with his books in bed. Maybe tonight he had fallen asleep with the shoe. But then the shoe moved, sliding over and under his ankles, binding his feet together. Robert lifted the blanket and saw two glowing yellow eyes. Their pupils were thin vertical slits. He tried yanking his legs out of the bed, but he was already too late. The snake coiled around the knees, thighs, and hips, immobilizing him from the waist down. The more Robert struggled to get free, the easier it was for the snake to encircle the rest of him, pinning his arms to his sides and anchoring his torso to the mattress. Every time Robert exhaled, the snake coiled itself tighter, slowing the circulation of his bloodstream. His hands and feet were already tingling. Finally, Robert closed his eyes and willed himself to wake up, because it had to be a dream. It simply had to be. Boa constrictors could not open windows. Massachusetts didn't even have boa constrictor. This was just a dream where Principal Slater turned into a frog monster. Any moment now, Robert's mother would open the door and turn off the lights, and the snake would disappear. "Give up, Robert." He opened his eyes. "Quiet now. We'll go easy on you." Or sorry, quit now. The snake's mouth had opened, but Robert couldn't hear it speaking. Or rather, he could hear Sarah and Sylvia speaking as plainly as if they were standing right behind him. Robert would say, "Okay," if he'd been capable of saying anything, but he lacked the strength to even nod his head. The edges of his vision were going dark. The room was fading. He felt like he was back underwater, stuck at the bottom of the swimming pool with no gate in sight. Then Pip and Squeak stumbled out from the bed, drawn out by unfamiliar voices. They saw the snake and immediately sprang into action mode, leaping onto Robert's nightstand and toppling his lamp. It fell to the ground with a crash. The boa hissed. Pip and Squeak leaned back on their haunches, baring their teeth. "Robert," Mrs. Arthur called from the bedroom. "What's that noise?" "Don't come in," Robert tried to shout, only no sounds could leave his mouth. Not anymore. The hallway light came on, filling the gap under Robert's bedroom with a pale yellow glow. The boa gave him one last warning, a squeeze that nearly made his heart pop like a balloon, before uncoiling itself and darting toward the open window. Mrs. Arthur's frantic footsteps were already coming down the hallway. As the last of the snake disappeared through the window, Pip and Squeak hurried under the bed just as the door opened, flooding the room with light. His nightstand lamp lay in broken pieces on the floor. "What happened?" Mrs. Arthur asked. Robert couldn't speak. He was still catching his breath. "And why's your window open? It's freezing in here." She walked over to the window and slammed it shut. "I'm sorry," he said. "I was just having another nightmare. I reached for my light, and I guess I knocked it over." "See, that's the thing I hate about Halloween," Mrs. Arthur said. "They put all these violent movies on television, and then kids can't sleep at night. We're cutting back on screen time, Robert. Do you understand me?" "All right," he said. "And you need to be more careful. Lamps cost money." After his mother left the room and closed the door, Robert got out of bed and walked over to his window. Under the light of the full moon, his backyard was bathed in a soft, pale glow. He could see the boa slithering across the grass, crossing toward a hedge at the rear of the lawn. Standing behind the hedge, waiting for the snake, were two silhouettes of human figures, two identical silhouettes. Robert couldn't see their faces, yet he knew exactly who they were.